Hello, Charlie TCG here, and welcome back to my channel. As you know, I'm covering my top picks, which I think will do well at Worlds, and now it's Lugia's time to shine. How's it been performing in Paldean Evolve? For a deck which I feel like is super powerful, it's not as really joined the conversation as much. It's not talked about as often as it once was, and there's now two different versions, Single Strike and the Colorless build. Which one would I think is the best sort of pick going into Worlds? Let's jump into it. So if we look at NAIC, day 1 and day 2%, meta share, it was 12% and then 10.3% respectively. Pretty powerful. A little bit of a fall from grace from where it once was, being the 30 to 50%. But I think Lugia with the amazing summoning star ability to like going into getting the Archeops to get the Primal Turbo, we haven't seen this brilliant combo ever since, and probably ever will, because it is absolutely incredibly broken. Focusing more on the single strike build, I definitely think is where America sort of is at. The likes of the Urshifu, the Tyranitar, the Yveltal, and Stojurna are really powerful attackers which get these big one-hit KOs, and also these milling sort of the effects to get rid of these very powerful cards which the opponent might have, like Palpad, Iona, and more importantly now, Super Odd. Or more of a color sort of build. The colorless build focusing more on the Weirdy and the Snorlax, pretty much attacking for like 200 damage, having like over 200 HP is really powerful. And the finish off the game with a Weirdy to push it to the active spot with Jet Energy, load off the energy to it and get those big one-hit KOs. Over in Japan, Lugia is definitely a tier 1 archetype. That's obviously with the help of Mew EX, which has definitely really helped Lugia V-Star get to that sort of stage in the best of 1 sort of format, but definitely still focusing more on the color sort of build over there, even without the Mew EX from 151 set. Definitely that is the build where Lugia is kind of going with it. Now, if we look at the online sort of meta here, Single Strike is the most popular sort of build on there, being 5% of the meta over there by being 52% win rate and having about 8 wins. Whereas if you look at the color sort of build, it's a lot lower by being 2.4%, same win rate, but only having 4 wins. Now, this could be purely on the basis that people aren't really understanding the color sort of build. It is more of a 2-shot sort of archetype, and then you finish off with Weirder. So it is very different to the huge beatdown, pure strength for what Single Strike Lugia has to offer. So let's look at some of the lists as well, which I think could do really well, and kind of like talk about the ones which should be on your sort of mindset. So if we look at this NA top 4, the single strike build here, it is absolutely an incredible sort of very powerful archetype. We are seeing the 4-3 line of Lugia, which is definitely more of the commercial build, which we're seeing. But I really like here playing the Chilominion and one Squawkabilly. I really like having this draw engine as well. Yes, we're focusing a lot more on the support Pokemon like Squawkabilly and Luminion, but I think these both have their big sort of merits. Squawkabilly is really powerful to kind of get that instant like draw factor if you need to go turn 1 if you don't really have a really good hand, and you can also dump those of your Archeops out in the bin, which I think is very powerful. Whereas Luminion can kind of get those really key sort of cards like Disruptor card like Boss and Iona, but more importantly, you need to get Professor Barnett to get that extra discarding with the Archeops if your potential Squawkabilly was prized. Its attackers as well, I think, are very powerful. Tyranitar V is really good. I think its first attack as well is really strong, doing 60 plus discarding the top 2 cards of your opponent's deck. This can be quite well, like I said, the extra mill sort of factor of this deck, getting rid of those super key cards like the Super Rod, like potentially a Path to Peak, any sort of really powerful cards which Tyranitar can easily get rid of and get those big one-hit KOs on those single price Pokemon, the likes of Single Strike Energy, I think is really strong. The 1/1 line of the Urshifu is definitely something which Raygun has really popularized and become more powerful. Pretty much getting those big one-hit codes on that Duraludon VMAX, going through anything is super powerful. You like to have that sort of like instant like KO on the Pokemon, which you can't really get. They can't really return a KO back on you, as well as also it's kind of like a big like auto loss. You don't play too much, you don't play Path to Peak, so you have to play this big I go through anything, and Urshifu definitely does that. Yveltal and Stojurna, this is really powerful and single price attackers. Yveltal, obviously, with the huge amount of Mew and Gardevoir out there, kind of getting one-hit KOs from them is really strong. And Stonjourner as well, like I mentioned, having that fighting weakness with the likes of the VM Arceus as well. Some Miraidons kind of float around the field. Getting a big one-hit KOs is really strong. The rest of this deck is very sort of straightforward, what we're kind of seeing. Item cards are purely on the draw sort of factor, like trying to get the Pokemon. Although I do see it, the only having 2 copies of Earn Fatality instead of the usual 3. You could cut the likes of Squawkabilly or potentially Serena, depending on what your matchups really are, to add that 3rd sort of copy. But definitely you will need to have those 4 stadium cards because Path to Peak is absolutely rampant. The huge rise of Arceus sort of builds around there, and also Mew kind of focusing even more in the Path to Peak, even in the Fusion build, you need to have an out to it because you want to get that turn 2 summoning star. I think this deck is really, really powerful. I think the single strike build is definitely up there. It's still very popular around the rest of the world, even Japan. People are still playing this, even though Japanese players won't be probably as many as like the American or even the European players. But I think the colorless build, you should still kind of like look at it because it's the colorless build, which a lot of people is very much more popularized over there. Again, they seem exactly the same. So pretty much the support account and stadium account, although we are playing one more copy of Boss's Orders. Kind of like you are attacking with Lugia, so that's why you're playing the 4/4 Lugia build, as well as also having the Snorlax and Weird as your other sort of attacking options. You could obviously add the likes of Radiant Charizard with Luminous Energy. You could add potentially other Luminous Energy as well to kind of like get those one prize, like one energy sort of attacking options as well. And you can even attack with Drapion very, very easily. So go into the Guard of Wilds, go into those Mews. So I really like that sort of effect of this sort of deck. Well, Snorlax now gains that therapy energy or therapeutic energy, pretty much doing 180 damage and not falling back asleep and having the Bravery Charm to have 200 HP. Really, really powerful, kind of like having this 200 HP monster of a single prizer. Getting those back-to-back KOs is really nice. But you only have a finite amount of energy. Jet Energy really like propels the deck, if you get what I mean, with that weird V, to kind of like use its ability to push all the energies to it when it's in the active spot to get those big one-hit KOs. So using like Lugia and Snorlax kind of like snipe sort of around, Boss's Orders kind of like clear those KOs, and then Weird at the end time and close out the game. That's kind of a real big strategy of this deck. And like you see in the end, the item cards are more focused purely on getting out your Archeops and discard part as quickly as possible. No Squawkabilly, no Radiant Pokemon, nothing like that. Just this is the pure, simple, straightforward color sort build. And I thought it was definitely something you should be kind of like understanding when you go into the format. Now, if we look at the matchups over here, Trainer Hill's kind of combine them all together as definitely focusing more on the single sort of drop build. We can see here it has a pretty good matchups, and obviously one of its worst sort of matchups is that Goodra Lost on Goodra by being only 39%. That being said, I think it definitely you could potentially focus a bit more in the single strike build as well, having them that Urshifu, which kind of goes through every sort of effect, is really, really powerful to kind of like get that, but it's only a 1/1 line. They could potentially Boss's Orders and get something to sort in the active and keep up his HP, do that healing factor. So that's definitely something to be a bit more scared about. By having a really good sort of the other sort of Lost Zone sort of decks is really powerful. The different single prize as well as two prize and attacking, kind of knowing exactly when you should go there, and then not really getting those big one-hit kills is something to really kind of be a bit more conservative about. They obviously be focusing more on your Archeops, so that's why you should really flood the board of energies when you sort of can, because that's where the Raikus, that's where the Sableye or Cramorant damage will kind of be focusing primarily on. I think also having a good Arceus as well as she empowers a matchup, I think is really, really powerful as well. Obviously, it's like with Miraidon. Miraidon is a bit more surprised because obviously they hit you for weakness, but you have all your other attackers don't have lightning weakness, and they could be single prizes again as big one-hit kills. So that's why I kind of favor more in the Lugia sort of archetype in that sort of route here. And Mew definitely something a bit more of a struggle with it. With not seeing the huge increase of Drapion, that's where I think Mew is definitely kind of like seeing its time to shine. People are focusing more on Spiritomb and not having the increase of Drapion. So Spiritomb, they can kind of go around there with the likes of Future Strike energy, but not having any Drapions around in decks. That's where Mew can really come to shine. And obviously, people in Europe, we like Mew. So kind of like not having Drapions in there, we're fine with that because we can just easily steamroll some of these decks, get those big one-hit KOs. That's definitely looking at the matchups or wise here. We can kind of really easily see that sort of thing there. We're not playing the some of these big sort of darkness attackers, instead only playing the Tyrantron and things like that. It could definitely really struggle in those sort of builds. So looking at my prediction for Lugia, I do think it's going to be about 12% of the day one meta share. It's very, very powerful here, and I do think potentially the colorless build will be, in fact, the most popular version because of some of the huge amount of play it does see over in Japan. That doesn't mean that it's not really going to be like we are going to see other sort of builds here. I do think we're going to see single strike focus more on the Urshifu sort of side, purely on the basis that because it wants to go through anything. The Duraludon is really, really popular over in America. So I think that's exactly why you should be playing Urshifu in your single strike deck. Not really focusing more on having just more Tyrantars and more everything like that. You really need that Urshifu to kind of go through those Duraludon VMAXs. And I think it's an incredibly strong pick for Worlds. Getting that amazing big one-hit KO is super, super powerful. And that's why I think the single strike build will probably be a bit more popular over in the States sort of side. But I think the rest of the world, we could maybe see the colorless build. There's so much creativity in that sort of build as well. So many other range of attackers, and more importantly, having the likes of Charizard is super, super good. Apologies if you hear my cat meowing in the background. He's just woken up from a nap. So anyway, I hope this has been helpful looking into Lugia V-Star and see exactly where it could be positioned over in Worlds. I do think it's a really good sort of pick, but being a really powerful archetype, which that should definitely test about. If you're worried about sort of some of its matchups here, I do think the single threat build will potentially be the more popular sort of build in America, where the rest of the world, I do think the colorless build will be a very, very powerful sort of build, as it's really, really popular over there in Japan. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to like and subscribe. Don't forget to comment down below, what deck would you be playing at Worlds? As you know, I definitely could be playing Xian Pao, but Lugia potentially could be a second right pick if I had all the cards to play with it. Don't forget to join the channel. It really means a lot, especially supporting the channel, to see exactly what you could really want in the channel. I will see you in a few days' time for the next video. Bye for now.